Hi. Um, Good evening. Can someone tell me if they can hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you very
are.
much. Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you and thank you for attending tonight's program with the artists from our current exhibition, Unseen. My name is Kate James. I'm the executive director at Concord Art. Concord Art has been supporting art, artists, and the Concord community with thoughtful, timely, and engaging exhibitions and programming for going on about 100 years now. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome and extend gratitude to the folks from Howland Capital for supporting tonight's artists panel and this exhibition. Without sponsors like Howland Capital supporting the arts in general and specifically Concord Arts exhibition program, we would not be able to curate important shows like this one. The process of organizing Unseen has been a catalyst for me personally. Thinking about what has been unseen in our history. I'd like to recognize that we live on native land and the indigenous people of Concord, or as they called themselves, they called Concord the Musketaquid, are the Nipmuc, Pawtucket, and Massachusetts nations. Thank you. Everyone who has experienced, and I don't use the word experience lightly, this show is moved, sometimes to tears, from the deep sorrow, sometimes to joy, from the beauty and the humanity, and often to anger with realizations of what is not acknowledged in history and everyday life. I've been lucky enough to hear and see the reactions, the emotions of those who have visited. If you have not had a chance to see Unseen, I encourage you to please come and experience it. Having witnessed tonight's 4 artists installing their work and collaboratively creating Unseen, I'd like to thank them for the very hard work and creativity they have brought to this show. Keith, we are in debt to you for assembling this group of artists and knitting them together in such a poetic way that only an artist curator with your talent could do. I'd also like to thank Concord Art's exceptional staff, all our dedicated volunteers, especially Bill Maxfield, and all the many generous patrons who support our work here. Tonight's program will start with a brief introduction by each artist about their own work, and then the group of 4 will have a discussion about their collaboration. Please put any questions you might have in the chat, and we will ask the artists after their discussion. And now let's hear from the artists. Tonight we have Stephen Torlentes, Lisa Palaway, Rasheen Fahandej, and Keith Morris Washington. Let's start with Stephen. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Kate and Marissa, for putting this together, and Keith for bringing us together. It's quite an honor to work with all of them. And I'll keep this brief and short because I know there'll be a lot of conversation here. But so I do have the photographic work in the exhibition. And my work is a long-term project looking at mass incarceration in the United States, and looking at the sites and the places that are often overlooked, where we incarcerate more people than any other nation in the world. This is a project that's been going on that I fell into over 20 years ago when a prison was built in my hometown. And I'm a little ashamed to say that I came to it through the aesthetic lens of how beautiful the lights on the horizon, these new lights on the horizon, looked when I first experienced them. And then I discovered, unfortunately, what those lights were and what they contained. And it has been a learning experience for me for every day since then. And it is something that I've toiled with in terms of how beautiful the landscape in America can be, but that these institutions dot it. And so I've traveled to 48 states and have photographed over 100 prisons and in their settings. And so I feel like for me, my voice in terms of talking about mass incarceration comes through this visual imagery of witnessing these places. So that's enough for me.
Our next person, Lisa. Lisa's next.
Yes. Hi, good evening, everyone. Really great to be here, and just echoing just the gratitude and space to have this conversation in the gallery, but also I think in this space online, we're creating something here. So I have made the site-specific drawing at the center. And I just need to share a little bit about how I came to my response in this exhibit. And originally, when Keith and I spoke, I was going to write, and this is my public service announcement for all of you to go see the work, because I was a huge fan of Keith and Rasheen and Steve's work. I could go on and describe the exact moment on all of their work that I was just moved, and as an artist, as a person, and so I was just really happy that Keith had asked me to write. But sometimes things take a different turn, and I realized in the spring that my response to the show was actually going to be in my creative response as an artist, and more specifically, my response as a woman of Filipino descent. And so it really came unexpectedly. During this year of the pandemic, I was really trying to grapple with our reality of so much loss, now over 600,000 lives in the pandemic, and all the other unimaginable losses that we've experienced. But underlying this grief was also the scapegoating and the violence against the Asian community. Just the week before the murders in Atlanta, I met with colleagues, alumni, students at my institution as we kind of huddled together in our fear and sadness. And a week later, the Atlanta murders happened. I think it really underlined for me this realization, and I've realized this, but I think it hit home even further this spring, that I am not immunized from this racism. And I think that my inclusion in the show is not a comparison, but rather a conversation to consider the societal condition that rationalizes racism. And if you will also make another plug for Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, she writes that racism is highly adaptable, and I'll add transferable. So The Shape of Grief, this work, is expressing things that I've been struggling to describe in any other way. And I'm just incredibly grateful to Keith for continuing to encourage me to make this work. And the conversation that we are having and we'll have tonight and further with Rasheen and Steve, I jokingly said to them, I felt like we eloped, the four of us, and we're like, oh my goodness, what did we just do? So anyway, so I just really, really happy to be here, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you. And Rasheen is next.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. It's wonderful to share this space with all of you. And I'm very excited about the conversations tonight. As an artist, I'm an interdisciplinary artist and in a way non-disciplinary. So very much the work and practice is focused on the concept. And I'm very much interested in projects and questions that interrogate social dynamics and look at structural inequalities and systemic disparities. My practice sort of sits at the juncture of art, technology, media, and also the process is socially engaged. So I'd like to always sort of shed light on that, because what you see in the gallery is only 20% or 15% of the work. The process is about community creation, and it's about sharing tools, and it's about thinking together. And so I'm quite interested, and also I value that collective wisdom of collaboration and co-creation in the process of making. So with this installation, it was incredible. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to work together, and the projects each brings such a depth of history and layering together. I'm sorry, can you still hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So one of the main inquiries before I go into the project itself, like for me in the practice and my research, is that when we are addressing complex social justice issues, how the process of art making could embrace and embody some of the changes that we envision. So that's where the community co-creation aspect of it and socially engaged part of the work sort of is coming from. The project at the exhibition is called The Father's Lullaby, and it's one of the main projects that I've been working on in the past 5 years. So it's an ongoing question and intervention into public spaces, that it really kind of comes from this sort of lens of looking through the lens of love and care into the very challenging issues that our society is facing today. In United States, since 1970, the incarcerated population has increased 700%. So there are one out of every 3 people in the United States, according to FBI, hold. Sorry, I'm like a bit. I've been installing another show today, so it's been quite chaotic. So 1 out of every 3 people in the United States, they have criminal record. And when I say that data to everybody, most people don't know about that. And I feel like despite the racial issues and the class issue and access issue, this is like a very much a philosophical question. So the engagement with the work, the project is not just coming and visiting the exhibition, but it's also a call for engagement and action, and that it comes from very much personal memories and history. So with this work, you are invited to think about your own personal memories and histories of childhood, and share something with this space as a way of thinking about the future and what we want for the next generation. I think I'm going to stop here. I'm sure there will be a lot more that we will be talking.
Thank you. Keith.
So I guess that's everybody. It leaves me. Excuse me. So I want to, first of all, thank everybody, particularly Kate, for this show, and I will get back to that. So just a little bit about my work. So my work is the paintings that are in the show. I think there are 5 big paintings, landscape paintings. And the paintings are all based on lynching sites throughout the United States. So just a little bit about, I'm going to try to keep my remarks as brief as possible. So maybe I'll just say, in terms of my art making, my process, it really is mostly, not mostly, but a strong aspect of it is just the way I process being on this planet, living in this country, being who I am in my skin. You know, I've always made work. And I've also had an interest in landscape and landscape painting, the land of this country, and through a series of coincidences and unfortunate events, I came to this project while I was in grad school, doing a series of paintings based on lynching sites. So that's what's there. I go to these places, I photograph them, and I make the paintings back in my studio. Many, if not most, if not all, these places are still very dangerous places, especially for people that look like me. So that's kind of like where my paintings are coming from. There are 13 so far in the series. I haven't done one for a little while, but I finally have sufficient studio space to be working that size again. So who knows, there might be a few more in my future. So I want to sort of, as quickly as possible, get to the conversation. But I think to do that, I need to give a little bit of background to how it came about. And there are definitely some people I need to express thanks for this happening. I already did thank Kate, and I can't thank Kate enough for allowing this to happen. But Kate came to my attention, I came to Kate's attention through a show that was curated by Joel Janowitz back in 2017. So that's really kind of the very origins of this. And I guess Kate took an interest in the work, asked me as that show ended in the fall of 2017, if I would be interested in curating the show. And I'm not a curator, so I was like, I said, sure, why not? That's kind of the way I tumble into things these days, it seems. So in the process, Lisa also mentioned the institution where she works, and actually 3 of the artists all work at that institution currently, and all 4 of us have been educated. So I really need to put a major shout out to the Massachusetts College of Art and Design, which actually is what is responsible for bringing us all together. It has helped to shape these brilliant minds and artists that you see in front of you, and the work that I hope you will all go into that gallery to see. So I cannot, it's just a huge shout out to that institution. It's like this incredible gem, the only public art school in the country. It's kind of hidden in Massachusetts, right? You know, it needs to be a little more known, but I don't think too much. So it was, so Sue, Kate asked me to curate the show. So over a series of conversations that I had with Kate and Sue Holland, who was the chair of the exhibitions committee at the time, they were sort of encouraging me to realize my vision on the show. I really had no idea what I was going to do. But it was in the process of conversations with Kate and Sue that the title came up as we were talking about racism, white supremacy, that we all actually live in this white supremacist culture. You know, it's a strong term, but you know, it's what it is. And we recognized how much of that exists unseen. So that's the way the title popped up. And then in terms of my vision for bringing the four of us together, in many ways, Lisa gets a lot of credit for that too. Because I have been working at MassArt since the beginning of 2000, and I think Lisa was there. Stephen was also there at that time, and it was not long thereafter that Rasheen also was a student there. So it's like we all kind of crossed paths, got to know each other a little bit, and knew about each other's work. And I had been thinking to exhibit with Steve for a long time, just kind of in the back of my mind, because the logical connection with both the way he and I are sort of looking at the landscape with what I think is a very important eye to sort of help us see deeper into the spaces that we exist in. So anyway, Kate talked to me. I mentioned to Lisa I have this show. I actually asked her if she wanted to do some writing for it. Lisa said, "Oh, you should ask Rasheen." And Rasheen had just sort of closed her show not that long prior at the ICA. She was in their Foster Prize exhibit. And so, of course, everybody was just spoken by this work. And I said, sure, absolutely. And to my great benefit, everybody said yes. So we were in conversation to get this to happen. The pandemic came in and just kind of blew everything off. It was supposed to happen last summer. I think it's actually in many ways fortunate that it happened this summer, that we got that additional year to be in conversation. And events transpired such that Lisa, I'm very glad, was inspired to make her site-specific drawings. And so that's how the four of us came together. And for me, it was not a cerebral process in terms of the four of us gathering. It just seemed so obvious and natural, right? And in the ways that all of our work is very thematically similar, although we all approach our subject matter very differently. And so in many ways, and again, I will encourage everyone, if you have not seen the show, to please do see the show. And if you've already seen the show, go back and spend some time, because of the way the work is in harmony with each other. It's like, one could call it like, it's almost like a little symphony or a little quartet of music, and each instrument resonates, each image resonates with the next and off. So I really wanted to open this conversation up. So that really is enough for me. Thank you all for being here.
There they are.
Well, thanks, Keith. You answered my question. I had wondered how Unseen had come. So.
You mean the title or just the gap?
Yeah, the title.
It was a great conversation that I hope that all of us will have tonight. It was just really wonderful talking. So I think the idea is, if folks are going to put questions in the chat area, it seems as though we could maybe just, I don't know if you can open up the mics and people can just ask questions or comments during the conversation.
I'm just wondering if each one of you could tell us why showing together has made a difference, and why it is different than other shows you've been in. What is it? Can you name what that is? I don't know, the poetry or however you see it.
and art can play a bigger role, or do you have concerns that, you know, there's so much going on with the daily news cycle that the issues you're raising could fall even more to the back burner, especially, you know, every day, you know, the graves of the indigenous people. It's just, it's a lot. So you know, because I'm hoping that's not the case, but I'm wondering where you kind of think we're going with this.
I can jump in there if
I just want to say one other thing. So I'm a pastel artist, and the discouraging thing is pastel artists, every show is just pretty little flowers and pretty little landscapes. And I just realized that yesterday that like pastel artists are doing almost no socially conscious stuff. So I'm actually thinking of trying to do some of that work and entering it into competitions, because it's just, and pastel artists are very socially conscious. You know, if you look at their Facebook pages, they're really up in arms, but for whatever reason, all the art's just pretty. So, okay, that's it.
Well, what I was going to say was that, you know, when artists work, I think that you know, it's part of commenting on our time, and that there is a challenge in terms of, if you're making work that's socially conscious, that you hope you have institutions and places that are willing to share it, because that's the lens that lets you see it. But this work is what's being said in the news media and what we hear all the time. It is part of the whole conversation, and through art, it allows an entry point for people to really meditate on a deeper level about the things that we're talking about. And I think all of us, our work, there's an endurance in our work also that it's not like the news cycle. In a way, my hope with the work is that for all of us, and this kind of great collaboration that's happened, is that it will leave the viewer with something that stays with them and asks them to use their voice as well.
I'm gonna kind of, can you guys hear me okay? I have an AC on. You're good?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I think just like from a first glance, especially since being one of the people that's worked with the exhibition so closely as part of Concord Art staff, something that always really blows my mind with interdisciplinary exhibitions as a whole is how, no matter how different the media is, there's always seems to be a really beautiful like kind of marriage between painting and drawing and video and photography. Like, just as a general comment, I always think that's so, for lack of a better word, cool and awesome. So I guess what I'm curious about is on a more technical level, just on a more technical and physical level, what has it been like interacting so closely with other artists that have media that in some cases are very different from ones that you're familiar with? What's that experience been like? Who wants to go first?
I'll respond to that real quick, and also circle back to Lisa's question earlier. You know, so we all go to mass art, and I think in some ways we are all exposed to all of those mediums. So it's not like any of the work is foreign. I think Rasheen started out as a painter. He's become this amazing video installation artist, right? So for me, it didn't seem so different to sort of be, quote, working with or assembling work of this different media, because thematically it's also similar in its general theme around racism and white supremacy. And so back to sort of Lisa's question about the timeliness or timing of the kind of work that we all do. And I think aesthetically, all four of our work is really kind of timeless, right? It's not like it's a snapshot of insurrection happening at the Capitol, right? It's landscapes, it's videos of personal stories, it's direct drawings in response to really horrendous circumstances. So I think in that regard, the work is timeless, but I also hope that in the near future, although I doubt that's going to be the case, it becomes obsolete work.
Yeah, are you done, Kate? Okay, maybe I'll speak to both questions as well. Both I think really important questions. In terms of Sasha, I feel like a major challenge that we have is actually siloing issues, social justice issues, siloing expertise, and sort of my work is an effort to sort of disrupt that, because I think, for example, in my work, I speak about social justice issues, but none of social justice issues are a siloed issue, right? So when you talk about racial disparity, you talk about costs, you talk about social, food justice, education justice, spatial justice. So it's really, really important to sort of bring a more wholesome view and perspective into these issues. The issue of criminality is not like my question with this work is how criminality is made. That's why the focus of all of these stories are on childhood memories of the fathers who've been incarcerated, and through that you understand what has been the challenges. And when you look at and you listen to those stories, you realize the systemic issue that exists in our society. If to give you an example, to make it more tangible, most fathers that I spoke to, they had like the major challenges in their childhood was food access. They had trauma. They were raised with single mom who had to work double job to just survive. There were issues, the environmental violence in their neighborhood. And then these are kids that they all got into the system very young. So when you look at that, then when you bring all of these sides together, then it's not just about, like something, it becomes about for that philosophical approach of a society and how we take care of each other. And that's why I wanted to sort of bring it to this, because I feel, expression, creative expression, artistic expression is a form of communication, is a form of creating connection and meaningful encounters. It doesn't matter what form and shape. And for me, this was really beautiful to see my work, to also Kate's question, in relationship with other media and with other ways of encounter. In my own work, I used a vast majority of medium within the digital or non-digital world. So if you look at the piece, there is stop motion animation, so that the particles in the work are still dust that they were animated hand by hand, or there is volumetric filmmaking. So it's really not about what is the technique or what is the medium, what is the best way to speak to this topic, or the best way to engage. So for me, that was an excitement, because I think any form of silo, I'm really interested in sort of fluidity of our human experiences, and how that layering of encounter through Keith's work, looking at that sort of landscapes, and all of what is sharing between all of these is that sort of poetry of encounter, that you're not put in the space of trauma in a harsh way that you cannot embody it. Our goal, I feel like as a whole, is to bring you on, and you're part of it. You're not an observer anymore looking at somebody else's issue, because that's I'm not doing my job. If you are looking at this as thinking about, oh, I understand, I have the sympathy or empathy, it's somebody else's issue. I want the audience to be the witness and come in and feel it and engage and question. another thing that is really important for my work is that I feel the state of inquiry, the state of questioning is a very active space. And we are not here to give each other's answers, but we are here together to question and look, and want a different way of living in this society that is just for everybody. And to speak to your question, I'm sorry if I'm like prolonging, but Lisa, to your question, I wish I could, I wish I could just create beautiful landscape. I wish I was living in that world. I actually did, like when I was living in Iran, I grew up in Iran as a minority. I grew up as a Baha'i, and it's a persecuted minority that we didn't have basic human rights. We don't still have in Iran. Like my friends' homes constantly being raided. They've been put in jail, like out of jail, they get bailed. Like, so it's like a constant issue. And also education, like higher education is banned for Baha'is. So I come from that experience. And when I was there, it was very actually hard to like speak to it directly. And I was making a lot of beautiful, beautiful imagery. But when I left Iran, like for me, the medium of art in any form, as Keith mentioned, I was a painter for many years before I became a like more media, but also non-disciplinary approach. Like, so I feel like it's like very much, as Keith mentioned, it's not about this time. These issues exist. We are dealing with these issues for years, like here in other countries, and also it's not unique to United States, but we are speaking about a very specific issue that is very much troublesome to witness in a democratic society, right? As an Iranian, I could have seen that in Iran and like expect that from that government. But like to come here in a democratic society, we really want to kind of uphold ourselves to those values that we are talking about, right? So I think like the approach to social justice, like the lens, there's still the aesthetic and beauty and poetry. That's the entry point, no matter what the topic is. Like I feel for all of us, it seems that like that's your entry point. That's where it allows many people to come together from different perspectives and still be able to encounter and have a conversation with the work in a way that is a dialogue, not an observation. I'll stop that. I stop there. I see Lisa's hand again, but so we could continue the conversation.
Yeah, my next question would be, do the people who your art about, do they get to see it? Do the minority communities have a way to see art? If not, how do you think that affects their life? Do they come to Concord Art Museum? And I'm not like trying to like insult anyone here. I'm wondering, are they art impoverished or not? Because most of these exhibits, at least maybe where I hear about them, are all in communities that they don't live in.
Well, I just want to add, Rasheen, and this is a conversation that the four of us have been having about, I'll just share, what might be our long-term vision about this conversation, because I think that we recognize that, we would like to invite a wider audience to these conversations. And so I think it's one that we're all grappling with, and I think also just as artists and how and where work is presented to what audiences is a question. I just want to just respond also to something that Rasheen was saying. As I mentioned, I was going to write. I have written. I have presented at conferences on issues of race and history and education. And I feel like what we have done in this exhibit is approach these conversations from not an intellectual place, as art has given you an opportunity to approach this, I guess, content or the subject matter from an emotional place. And it is heavy, right? But it's also necessary in order for us, and we talk about Keith's paintings and the history embedded in it, is so important for us to understand so that we can continue to move forward somehow.
Yeah, I guess my last comment I'll make is I volunteered many years in the Concord prisons, and many incredible artists behind walls, but so I enjoyed this exhibit for many reasons, and but having had that experience, for at least from me, made the exhibit more meaningful. So thank you so much for putting this on.
I don't want to take a lot of space, but maybe just to like just to speak to what you mentioned, because I think that's a very, very important question, Lisa, in terms of accessibility to art and who's seeing the arts. And that's actually one of the critique of documentary work or many other form of work, that they become extractive, right? So you go to a community, you take photos or you make videos, and then you take it on and like you disappear. So that's definitely something that I'm very much mindful about, and that sort of co-creation aspect. When at the beginning, when I was introducing that my work is actually questioning those aspects of media production and documentary production. It doesn't mean that I have a solution, because at the end it also comes to human capacity, right? So I cannot hold contact to all the people that I worked with over the years, but at the same time, like throughout the process, I'm constantly mindful of how I can create spaces that is a giving space. And that's one of my major questions, like how artistic process, how the creative process could become a giving space to that community that it was built. So that's why, like for me, like showing the work in local spaces is very important. And as Lisa mentioned, that one of our main conversations now here is that how can we move on? Like we did so much work to bring this work together in this space. Like how could it be a traveling exhibit, not going to major places, but how it could exist in community spaces, that there is more access, there's more dialogue there. So yeah, and I'm happy to speak to that like separately, like in terms of like the co-creation and workshop creation on in the process, for those of you who are interested.
And I'll just respond also to that kind of briefly. In terms of my thinking about my work, my paintings are really big. If you've seen the show, you know that they're really big. And my intention is that those paintings be in institutions like art museums, that they are like, my folks, like we know we got lynched, right? It's like, it's not a question, right? It's in those places where our cultural rituals get reproduced in those institutions like museums, that in fact this work needs to exist, so that those audiences start to have these kinds of conversations, because those are where the levers of power are. Right, and that's where those things need to change, and those are our institution places. And also, just in terms of access to arts, let us not forget, we are all trained at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design, which is a public school, which makes part of its mission access to the public. So we own it. We got it.
Hi, I would like to ask that if Keith, would you elucidate on your series on lynching, in your initial comments, the real power of that didn't actually come through as far as I could understand. And it's quite an extraordinary series, if you would.
Well, I think you just did, right? And I'll thank you for adding that kind of emphasis to it. And I would just take a point of personal privilege and introduce my dearest hero older brother, Kenny Washington. Who just asked that question.
And we did not set this up. I really wanted to. I promise you.
So, and truly, unfortunately, Kenny lives in Indianapolis. So unless I can like get him a ticket real quick to get out to see the show, you're probably not going to see this show. But I think the power of my work and the series that you're thinking of, to see it in conjunction with these other three artists' work, just like what you're talking about in terms of my paintings and the impact of them, gets amped up like 10, 20, 100 times based on the context. Because like really this show is about the four artists and their work working in conjunction. And the sum of the whole is much greater than the parts. And in the ways that the issues that we are dealing with, as Rasheen has talked about, it's all these little sort of siloed things. So we're trying to remove those silos, those things that are unseen, so that we start to see the connections between all of this stuff. As Kate started off our conversation with, we're all living on stolen land. Like and I feel like as a country, as a culture, we just don't deal with this. And I'll conclude with this one last thing because it's so important. What Rasheen was talking about in terms of the oppression that one expects from a country like Iran. But coming to the United States, it's a democracy that it has never been. It has never been. But we have these stories about ourselves that allow the unseen to remain unseen. And we have to correct the story because this country is not a democracy and we're moving further away from that possibility every day. Concord Art Register, you have your hand.
Hi. Hi there. I'm the registrar at Concord Art, so I have the unique fortune of seeing the shows and getting to meet some of you, and also seeing the people that come in to see the exhibit. And I have got to say, we are a predominantly in Concord, Massachusetts, we're a predominantly white community, and the people that have come in were brought to tears because of how profound the exhibit is. It is so amazing. It's one of the best things I've ever seen there. But I'm really, the fact that the people that are coming in who are predominantly white is a really good show of how you are affecting us, those of us that are in these little bubbles. To Rasheen and Lisa's point, who was asking the questions earlier, this is a way to get to us, to approach us and through art to get to the this white public. I also wanted to say that I'm really moved by Keith or whoever decided to have each of you represented in every room, because I think that every room that you guys are exhibiting in, you all are represented, and that is profound in itself, because it's saying well, it hits people in so many different ways. Because you have all of your accents, your thing highlighted, your visual, your audio, it's just wonderful. And it also makes sure that you're all represented in every room. So in a larger picture, you're representing the larger picture as a whole, as a community. So I find that this exhibit one of the most profound, wonderful exhibits I've ever seen. And in fact, a woman that works at the ICA said it was one of the best things she's ever seen. Cannot believe that it was just in this small community gallery. It really is an extraordinary exhibit. Everyone needs to come see this. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much. You did an amazing job.
Can I just add something here? Sorry, our internet went out here in Concord. Surprise, surprise. We just actually sat with Sam Williams today from the Concord Prison Outreach, and the three of us were all laughing about how bad the internet is in Concord because they refused to build a cell tower here. So surefire here. We're huddled around this one computer. So I'd like to reiterate what Lisa just said, and thank you, Lisa. What's been so interesting to me is that this show was very hard to write about. We couldn't put into words, we couldn't intellectualize what we wanted to say and what we wanted to have happen. We felt that that would kind of spoil it, which is so interesting to me. I've never experienced that before with an exhibition where it felt wrong to describe it. It felt like it would take away, and I still believe it would take away. Although I really would love somebody, a poet, somebody to come in and talk about it and give and write about it in a beautiful way. I actually asked Sam Williams today to write an article because he is a poet and he felt it and understood this show so well. So I invite any of you to do that. I also hope you come and see it, because to experience it and to feel it and to immerse yourself, as Lisa said, is really important. And it really brings in so many ways joy, in the craziest way that you feel joy after viewing such seriously horrifying subjects. Maybe one of you can speak to that. Why does that happen to people? Why do they feel so happy when they're there, when they're looking at a painting of a lynching? And it's hard to believe.
I'll respond to that, and then I do want to be sure Loretta gets to ask her a question. So in terms of my making and really thinking about all of this, a quote from Cornel West comes to mind when he's talking about blues and jazz musicians. He talks about blues and jazz musicians taking the catastrophic and making it lyrical. And I think in our own ways, that's what all of us are doing, because everything in that show is about a kind of catastrophe, and we've made it lyrical. And it's the aesthetic of all of the work is just amazing. So Loretta, please.
Thank you, Keith. I was just thinking about when you said how your paintings being large, right, that you wanted them to be seen in an institution, right? It's this idea of, the way I understood it, as this is meant to be shown at an institution, often at a predominantly privileged communities, often white communities, right? And then I was relating that to what I believe, Rasheen, you said about your work socially engaged, and it's a call to action. right? So this idea of showing all of your works together is
Oh, I just lost you.
Loretta, you're frozen, but if you're able to type your question in the chat, we might be able to get it that way if you can still hear us, because it sounds like it's a really good question.
Or turn off your video.
Yeah, give that a shot. We'd love to try and answer this for you. I'm sure the artists would. Oh God. Worst case scenario, you can absolutely email us too. Get in touch with us.
We can give Loretta a couple moments to reconnect with her Wi-Fi. We are at 8 o'clock. I think we can go a little bit over if there are other questions in the audience or comments that folks have been wanting to make. Feel free to just unmute and jump in. Or if one of the panelists has a question for another panelist.
I was just wondering, I mean, I feel like I think Loretta was perhaps getting at how reconciling, Keith, what you just said about kind of showing in an institution, right, an established institution, and Rasheen's, you know, in some ways those are on different sides of the spectrum, maybe. But I mean, I think that is our challenge, and I think a really interesting one to think about. I think that's what Loretta was getting at. But I think that we are now showing together, and I think that we've demonstrated the different ways that this conversation could happen. I don't know your name, that you were the Concord Art Registrar. You brought up the fact that there are 3 different rooms, and I was actually thinking the other day that we've actually demonstrated 3 different ways that this conversation could happen depending on the size of the space. You know, we've actually adapted it to a different, depending on the size of your room, we've got a different option for that. So anyway, I think it may be, I don't know. I mean, I think that as far as museums, educational institutions, someone brought up the idea, Rasheen talking about earlier, this idea of siloing, or how typically, traditionally, the mediums are. I really think as everything else is being reconsidered, how, again, and where this kind of work is shown is something to consider for all institutions. So.
I agree. I think you've done a tremendous job bringing it forward to our community. It's Lisa at Concord Art again. And I hope that you continue your work together, because uniformly, I have to say that when I walked up the stairs, and this is before anything was labeled at Concord Art, and I walked into the room, and the visuals, Stephen, your photography, I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know what your photography was about. And even before I knew what it was about, the imagery is beautiful. So all of your presentations, your imagery was spectacular in and of itself, without even having a background to it. So this show is just so wonderful, in my opinion, and from the people that I have seen coming back from it. And the James Baldwin quote that's at the front entrance, people have gone in and read the quote in the beginning, and just, it didn't really it had no resonance. And then went through the show, and then at the end said, this was spectacular. So it makes all the sense in the world at the end, because you guys all work together so well, and your pieces complement each other, and it resonates so well. So I do hope you continue on, and keep this movement going, and yeah, and welcome back anytime. It's wonderful.
I had a short comment. I don't know if you can hear me. This is Mary, and I work at Concord Art. And I just wanted to say that, we've talked about what you guys have brought to us, but I also feel my personal experience of your work is just that. When I look at Keith's work and Steve and yours, they were so beautiful, and I'm drawn to them. And then boom, I find myself somewhere I didn't expect to be. I found myself at a lynching site, or Steve and I looked at your picture of the Concord Museum, or the Concord Prison, which is so beautiful. And then I realized I'm in my backyard. I'm here. This is my neighborhood. And Lisa, your work jumps off the wall and comes into my personal space and requires me to react to it, to walk around it, to be in it. And Rasheen, same with yours. I was watching and being sung to, and all of a sudden your life-size screen goes black, and I see myself standing there. So I'm forced to be there in each of your work. And the distance between me and what you're talking about gets smaller. And I'm compelled to consider what you're saying. I'm sort of forced to come to you and into your work too. So I wanted to thank you for that. It's been making me think since I've seen it, and I keep re-experiencing it as I behold your work. So thank you for that. It keeps working on me.
Can I make a quick comment? Hi, my name is Sam. I appreciate, I went by a couple of weeks ago and witnessed all of the beautiful artwork, and it touched me in a lot of ways, personally, spiritually, cognitively. But as I was listening to all of the comments, one of the things that stood out is that, when you walk into this experience, it has a holistic sensory stimulation, right? So we live in this very rigid left brain culture of intellectualism. But in this experience, it's calling the action to action all of the many senses in the body, right? And oftentimes that's rare, right? Because we're so much in the intellectualization of everything. I also thought about how we all share a responsibility of bringing creative expression into the world, and that the work of the artist is to act as a catalyst, right? And that call to action is the experience that we have to then, whether we can bring that physical work with us, we can still bring what that physical work has done to us internally to those communities where the work might not be able to presently go. And I want to just say, like, thank you, because art is supposed to awaken the spirit, awaken the mind, awaken, the heart, and you all have done that. And it seems like from the folks that I've heard, they will carry your art and the creativity of their expression to others. And so I want to say thank you, appreciate your work, your creativity, and your power, because it is touching and transforming on what I would call the non-physical level. Because oftentimes we only see art as a physical, but there's a non-physical vibratory energy beyond the physical that is probably more impactful. So thank you for creating all of that and calling our senses to action.
Thank you, Sam. I just want to pipe in one little thing here. I had a nice conversation with Sam at the opening, and part of the intrigue for me in terms of just doing this show was, I would say yes, wherever they wanted to go and do this with this group. But the fact that it was in Concord and that, Concord's community is steeped in lots of history, that people know about in history books all over, but down the road is a prison that is sort of remains unseen, but thousands of people go around that rotary every day, and people inside hear those cars going by, but they don't see or can't see. And Sam said something that stuck with me, because he said that, inside the prison, that those who are incarcerated can see the tops of the trees, and the goal for them is to see the bottom branches. And so I would like it for whenever any of you go by that place, just to look at the trees and think about that, because it really stuck with me.
Can folks hear me? Okay, so sorry, I got kicked out for a few minutes, but I'm back. And I also typed it in the chat section, but I was like, as you are talking about your work, right? I mean, Rasheen, I think you mentioned about the art also being a call to action. And I think Sam, that's also what you mentioned earlier. And Keith, the way you talked about your painting supposed to be in this institution of power, to be seen by people with power, because they're the one who ultimately needs to dismantle white supremacy, right? The white people with power. And I think in relation to that, I'm wondering, because I struggle with this too, as I think artists of color, often the way that your work is either like fetishized or aestheticized, right? It's only talking about the beauty, but not the message. So I'm wondering, how do you like handle it, I guess, on your own? And also, do you address it? How do you address it in the public and also to yourself?
Bro, it's so loud.
Is that directed to me or everyone? Anyway.
It was directed to everyone, but I think particularly, yes, anyone jump in.
I'll just say sort of briefly with my work, in ways like many of the locations are just on the side of the road. And it's very possible for anybody to drive down the side of the road and not realize what they just looked at. So when the paintings are shown, there's an article, a description of what happened at the lynching. And my hope is that the viewer will read the article and then have a different experience. But it's not a total loss if they don't, and they just see a big, pretty landscape.
I am wondering, Loretta, if part of your question is how artists of color perhaps navigate the space. And I will share that, this is very new work for me, highlighting my identity as a woman of Filipino descent. My work has never been about that specifically. And so you are all watching me navigate that right now. And I think that, the conversation that Keith and I had in preparation for this, has really helped me realize that I want my whole being to be seen as an artist, as a person, as an educator. And that is, I think, I've said this for years in my classrooms, and I think that it really, but doing it in my work has shaped a whole nother level of thinking for me, and engaging again in a relationship with my creative self. And I again, thank this opportunity from Concord Art. All of you were so amazing in our wonderings as we asked questions. It was very organic. You know, I placed something on the floor and looked over at Keith, and it worked perfectly with Steve's photograph. I mean, it was kind of really felt meant to be the way that things happened. There wasn't too much, you know, it was really quite synergistic. So.
I would like to also, like, I know we are at time, but like, speak to that, Loretta, as well, because I think that's a very important also question of like how to navigate like our bodies and self and our work in this world, because it's very much in every space that you are, you're sort of being fetishized for one thing, if you know, like so like this was like in my artistic practice, like one of the first year I was here, not the first year, maybe the second or third year that I was like here as an artist, like that issue of what the expectation is of you and what sort of work is expected of you as a woman from Iran was something that I speak to it now in this work, because like the expectation was to come and see something that you could visually identify it as such, right? The visual identifiers, and also to be able to comfortably put it on the other side and say, I understand, but this is somebody else's issue. So very, very soon I realized, like, if I'm here and I'm speaking to a different audience, that they don't share a lot of the experiences that I'm speaking to, I need to work a different methodology to bring people into this space and share this space with you. And so with this work also is the same with The Father's Lullaby. For those of you maybe who haven't seen the show yet, it's about mass incarceration and absence of fathers, and how that absence manifests in the life of children and women in the community, but through that space of sharing memories and lullabies. And it's focused on men, because it's like the number of them, the number of men who are absent in the community. But also I feel, you know, the way that we silo everything, right? We talked about emotion and intellect. I consider emotion as an intellect. So the way that we silos our bodies, our mind, our spirits is like problematic, in like, you know, like in all. So we like, that's fluidity of humanity. The same way, like with a lot of men that I spoke to, they were talking about toxic masculinity as one of the major contributor to the way that they got involved in these issues as a young child or teenager. So like that sort of vibrating, this sort of the part of humanity of manhood who has been sort of robbed away, right? Like that sort of nurturing, compassionate, loving. A lot of men don't feel comfortable singing lullabies. So like amplifying that voice and bringing it back, like is sort of that sort of part of action. That's why when you come to this show, you don't see an incarcerated father's face singing lullaby for you. You can never identify. You're never given that power to take ownership over their image and their body and their being. You're always put at a distance, and that sort of like a space that when you come there are a lot of people speaking, and some of them might be, and some of them are community members, that's sort of the call. So you become part of a whole rather than a singular body that is identified. And you know, like, and when you see the bodies of fathers who are incarcerated, like mostly are through this sort of a space of being presence and absence, or like in the first room when you enter, a major part of this work is audio documentary, that you're sort of hearing their voices. Or there was like at ICA, there was this encounter with like touch. You touch a surface and you activate, you see yourself first. and you touch the surface and you activate the voice. So I really loved, when you were mentioning that when the TV goes black, you see yourself, and you like that's an startling moment, right? That you realize you're there visually even. So I think that, like, absolutely, as an artist, these are like a specific, like my work, like none of it is accidental. Like I'm really meticulous, even though it doesn't show, like about your relationship as an audience to the piece, and where you're from and where you're standing and where you need to be. And I do all of my best to try to get you there. How much I'm successful or not is like, but it's really wonderful to hear people talking about like that, the space of feeling, that the space of embodying, right? That the space of being there. That's what we want as an artist, because like the intellect, like, like the intellect is one, but when you go to it with the rational, then you're sort of separating yourself. That's sort of my like, you have to come to it like being there, present, before you start being able to even verbalize it, right? Like when Kate said we could not talk about the show, I'm like, absolutely. If you talk about the show, then the show is failing, right? You have to feel it before you even verbalize it. Like that's the power of visual images, right? That things happens to us before we even know. Like we are all being like washed through all the media that we are consuming, and we don't know, right? And we cannot necessarily verbalize all of them, but we are embodying them. So anyway, so I'll stop there, but but I want to stop. I actually want to stop here to ask you for that, because I think it's on you. Like, and Loretta mentioned that in the chat too. Like, okay, like we did that. We did our work as an artist. So if it's something that it moves you, what needs to happen after? What do you see? What do you see the conversation should go? Where do you think we could, like, there could be more engagement? And one of the effort, like I had like a 1.5-hour conversation. It was a half an hour meeting with Sam, and then it turned to like 1.5-hour conversation, which was like wonderful to talk about, for this show is a start of a conversation in Concord around all of these issues that we are talking about. And you now all are part of it. So how can we, move these discussions forward, move these conversations forward? And in terms of my work, please like go online. It's a call again, like you could go on this website and you could record your voice and be part of this exhibit. There is a media component. So I consider it a poetic movement, like really having this sort of collective minds and bodies vibrating these questions and thinking about them, each one of us in our own way, is an important part of this. So I'm curious, like, what happens after that? What are some of the manifestations of these questions and thinking beyond this space?
Shane, can I say something real quickly?
And before you jump in, we just want to
Okay,
send Stephen off. We know he has to get going.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. I think we have
Thank
two
you,
more
Stephen.
questions, and then we'll wrap
go
up
ahead,
for
Jen.
tonight.
Okay,
Thank you so much, Stephen.
go ahead, Sam.
No, I was just gonna really piggyback on what Rasheen just said. The last 16 to 18 months in this country has shown us a lot about the state of the human mind, the human body, heart, and the human body. And I think this work, again, is another reminder of the conversation that has to be continued, the conditions both in society and those unseen populations also have to be. So I do think that we have to figure out a way how to continue this conversation beyond this venue, beyond, because I think it's important. I think Concord as a location has a very pivotal history and meaning of social justice and democracy, and I think it's time. I don't know if we need any more reminder than what we've seen in the last 16 to 18 months across the spectrum of how human beings have been acting and seeing each other. So I agree. I think so I am willing and excited excited to partner with you all and the Concord community and any other conscious folks who want to figure out some deeper extended conversations around why it's important to treat each other in a way of humanity and a way of love.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I think we see Lisa's hand up. Why don't we go to Lisa and then we'll wrap up for the evening.
Okay. Sure. I think to answer your question about, what we can do as individuals, I've told everybody about this exhibit, whether they want to hear about it or not. Most people are just, they're just kind of busy with their daily stuff. So I've told them about it, and in particular that they ought to read the description of the lynching. My other question would be, do you think that the George Foreman murder changed things for Americans? Because really, for the first time, they're hearing things in graphic detail, which has always just been kind of like summed up as statistics. We have, X number of incarcerated, we have this, we have that. Now they're seeing what has actually gone on. And do you think that will change things? And does it change you as artists to say, wow, because your exhibit is also very graphic. So I'm curious if you think the George Foreman thing, the lesson of it might be that we need to be graphic, we need to be specific, and not just, kind of rhetoric and, sounding like the presidential inaugural address. I'll finish by saying, I've told people if I was elected president of the United States, my inaugural address, I would read one of these lynching things, because millions of people around the world are listening, and let's just stop, let's just say what it really is, so that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to offer a quick correction, it's the I think you meant George Floyd, not George Foreman.
That's okay. All right.
So I'll just respond to that really briefly.
Yes, please.
I think that certainly the murder, torture, lynching of George Floyd brought a lot of stuff to light, made it quite obvious. Sam talked about the past 18 months. I would say the past 18 months, which was a crescendo of the past 5 years.
Yeah.
So will it change things? Well, time will tell. Time will tell, I don't know. I'm done.
Right.
Okay, you're good.
Are we on? Okay. I want to apologize for our technical difficulties tonight, but you all carried the show, and I feel like it's a real metaphor for this particular show, because I said to Keith, I think the best thing I ever did was just let him do his thing and not interfere and just be quiet, because he really had a vision and put it together magically. So I want to thank you again, Keith, and thank the artists, and thank all of you for being here tonight. I'd also love to tell you that I think what's going to happen next is that many people will see this show. It will stir something in them. It will give them the feeling that it's meant to give them. And it's a very individual experience. And then they will be called to action. And so what the next step is for everybody to get everybody to come to this show. And maybe within that, the show will travel. Maybe within that, some smart person will write a great article. Who knows what will happen, but please publicize it and tell people to come, because it has to be experienced. That's the only way it works. Every night I go home and I'm singing the songs, the lullabies in my head, and I'm so grateful for them because they're so beautiful and they give me such peace and they're filled with love. I want to call each one of the singers and thank them, because it's a gift. It's a beautiful gift. We're so appreciative, and I can't wait to see all of you. Come see the show many times. It is like a chapel here, and it's waiting for you to experience. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Amazing exhibit.
Thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
joining
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you all very much, truly.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Everyone say
Congratulations.
Everyone say good night as they head out. It's a tradition now. You have to say good night as you log out.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Night, you all.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Well,
Thank you.
night.